All right, I've got a job to do. And my job today consists of doing some work on my 2008 S300 Bobcat skid steer. And so what is the work that I'm going to be doing on it today? I think that this puddle down here pretty much explains what it is that I need to do. And that is that tilt cylinder right there has been leaking. And that one, you can kind of see right down in there, is beginning to leak. I have already replaced the seals on this cylinder already. I've had this skid steer, I was just thinking before I started to record here how long I've had it. I've had it at least 3 years, and I bought it with just a little under 2,000 hours on it. And now it almost has 2,400 hours on it. So 400 hours in a 3-year period of time. For somebody who uses this piece of equipment just on my farm, and I'm not using it as, a piece of equipment that I'm out there making a living on, that's not a tremendous amount of hours. But I think a lot that it has to do with is, what was this machine subjected to before I bought it? And after I bought it and I got to looking around a pretty good bit, I noticed that this thing was in a very, very sandy, dusty, gritty kind of environment. The particles of that were all over the machine. And I think probably what happened was some of these cylinders ended up, just the hydraulics got contaminated in it. But for the most part, I'm not so sure that the cylinder walls have not been compromised and that they're just pitted in there. And if that's the case, then even though I have replaced the seals on this cylinder already, and now it's leaking again, and then this one is beginning to leak, I think once the inside of that cylinder wall and here starts to get pitted and you put new seals in there, all it's going to do is just tear up the new seals. And so it's not a terrible job to do as far as replacing the seals in these cylinders, especially these up front. They were pretty easy. But I did not get in there and I did not hone out that cylinder wall or anything like that. I just put the seals in there and put it back together because I was trying to get it back up and running. And then now I've developed another leak. So what I am going to do this time is that I am just going to replace those entire cylinder assemblies. And then I will take these things in, or I may not. And one of the reasons why I'm replacing them is because, in all honesty, replacing these, or I should say having these cylinders rebuilt, it's just about as expensive as buying new cylinders for it. And so that's one of the reasons why I just opted to go ahead and get some new cylinders. But yeah, these cylinders, the tilt cylinders anyway, I should say, you can get these things pretty reasonable. And in fact, here are the cylinders that I ordered. And I was able to get these for right at $500 each. And so I know a lot of people out there are kind of going, oh, that's not cheap. Well, in comparison to having these things rebuilt, it wouldn't be unusual to pay probably $300 to $350 each just to have it rebuilt. So you're not too terribly far off by just going ahead and getting new cylinders. Now, I will say this to you, these are not original Bobcat cylinders. You would not be able to justify buying new cylinders as opposed to rebuilding them if you were buying original OEM Bobcat cylinders, because the Bobcat cylinders are just too expensive. So what I was able to pay $500 each for aftermarket, Bobcat wanted $800 each. So at that point, it's not reasonable to buy new cylinders. You might as well just take these off and have them rebuilt. But if I can get these aftermarket cylinders for $500 each, then it does become reasonable to just buy the new cylinders. And so I bought these cylinders from a company called LPS, which is Loader Part Source. I have bought things from them in the past. In fact, I've got a whole oil change kit coming. I have a whole hydraulic filter kit coming and all that stuff. So I have bought a lot of service things from them before. I may have bought some, larger parts from them before, but this is definitely the largest purchase that I've made from them as far as these cylinders are concerned. So anyway, that's just a thought on this kind of thing in terms of changing out these cylinders. To me, I just thought it was going to be more reasonable to just put some brand new cylinders on there. These tilt cylinders, they should be pretty reasonable. We just have a pin bolt system right up top, and we have a locked pin right down here. So you just take this safety bolt out, and then you just knock it out. And so one of the things you want to do first before doing this up front on this lip cylinder is take that entire Bobcat system and lay it down flat on the ground so it doesn't flop down on top of you. So let's go ahead and get these things removed, and let's get the new ones on. All right, I got that first cylinder off, and now what needs to take place is this fixed hydraulic line right here needs to be transferred off of the old cylinder onto the new cylinder, so you can see where the fittings are for that. So one more step, you got to take this fixed line off. Okay, so the new cylinder has the fixed hydraulic line that's been put on it now, and so now we're ready to go ahead and get everything hooked back up on this new one. So let's get that done. All right, so I got that cylinder on there. I got the tapered pin put back in. I've got the bolt tightened down, and I've got the hydraulic lines tightened down. I do not have the rod all the way down into the Bobcat yet. I will wait until I get this other cylinder put on there, and then I'll just get in the machine, crank it up, and I'll drive the rod down to the Bobcat. Or I might just be able to pull the Bobcat up to it. We'll just see which method works. But anyway, that cylinder's on. Hydraulics are good, or tightened on there. So let's go ahead and get the other cylinder off. All right, that retainer bolt that holds that pin in, it was just all stripped on the top and all that stuff, and I couldn't get it out, so I just decided to cut it off. I'll just have to buy a new one and a new nut. No big deal, that happens. I went ahead and bought 2 new pins for this. The other ones did have some wear on them. Here's the old pin, and you can see that it has a very distinct wear pattern in there. It's worn right here along these grooves. It's a little bit higher right here, and so it's best to go ahead and replace that in comparison to the new one. All right, let's see if we can get this thing put in place. I'm going to try it. I'm going to see if I can just lift the Bobcat up to it and get these pins put in place. That's it, let it go. You did it. All right, now that everything's together, let's get in there, crank it up, and operate it. Let's make sure that everything's working and I don't have any leaks. Looks good. Okay, so we got those cylinders swapped out. I got everything all hooked back up. I put new pins down in the bottom. I put new safety bolts in there. And so it still needs to all be greased and all that kind of stuff. But while I have it right here in this state, the next thing that I want to do is I want to do a hydraulic system service. So I'm going to lift up the cab. I'm going to change out the case drain, or the inline drain. There's a couple different names for it. The actual name for it is the hydrostatic motor case drain filter, or sometimes referred to as the inline filter. So I'm going to lift up the cab. I'm going to change that out. And then I'm also going to change out the main hydraulic filter, which is located underneath the cab as well. And then I'm going to add hydraulic fluid to it, grease everything up. I'm also going to do an oil change on it and put a new fuel filter on it. So let's get all that stuff done and get this thing up and operating, ready to go. Okay, so we are now up under the machine and or up underneath the cab. Inline filter that I need to get to is right there. My finger is actually on it right there. This cylinder shaped filter housing is right here, and so there is 2 return lines, one here, and you're not going to be able to see this, and there is one right over there. I need to take those 2 lines off, and then what I need to do is separate this whole filter housing right in there and pull the filter out and then replace it. So what I'm going to do now is these 2 control arms right here. These are the arms that are controlled right here. You can see I need to take those off, move them off to the side, and just kind of manipulate some of these lines out of my way so that I can get down there to it. So that is the inline filter that needs to be replaced. And what it is there's a small element inside. And so I just separate that housing, I pull the element out, I put the new one in, put it all back together again. And then we've accomplished that. But they do not make that easy to get to. Nice job, Bobcat. All right, let's get after it. All right, I've got these rods taken apart right here, and I've got them kind of tie wrapped out of the way, and so that I can get down and get some access to this right here, this big hydraulic line right here. I also tie wrapped it out of the way, and so right there is a line I need to get off, and that one right over there is what I need to get off. So what I am going to do in the interim is I am going to get this line removed as well so that I can get it pulled out of my way, and I'll just kind of tie wrap it out of my way as well. All right, so after we got all those lines loose, then you've got to break this filter loose and then just unscrew it. All right, there is the whole element right there. All right, so we're going to get this. Now we're going to separate this filter element, well, the housing. We're going to separate the housing, and then we're going to get to the element. And I've just put it in a vise, and let's get it out of here. It has a couple springs in there, so be careful when taking this thing apart that you don't have springs flying all over the place. So there's the main element right there. There is the spring that I'm talking about right there that we don't want to lose. All right, so you got a main spring. We'll keep that spring down in there. So there's your two spring elements. We'll keep that one right there. Don't lose that. And then the other one kind of fits over the top of it. But there is your inline hydraulic filter, your hydrostatic motor hydraulic filter or inline filter. There it is. All right, so we're going to replace that. I'm not going to clean it. I'm not going to do anything. I'm going to look it over and see what kind of sediment I have on it. I saw a little piece of sediment right there. I don't know that this has ever been replaced. I've never replaced it. But anyway, I've got a new one, and so let's just put it on there. Right now, I don't really see any sediment or anything like that that's going to cause me any concern as far as, you know, are the motors making metal? It doesn't look like it on this filter anyway. All right, so let's put the new one in, get this thing back together, and let's get all that back together again. Okay, and so here is my new kit that I got with my new filter in it, and it also comes with two new O-rings, and those O-rings are going to replace the existing O-rings. One is right down in there, and the other one is on the outside of the cap itself. All right, so I got that filter put back in there again. I initially took this line off just to give me some access, but I have that back on. And then your two return lines right here, I've got all of that back on. And then now what I'll do is just take these tie wraps off that I used to get everything out of the way, put all the linkage back together again. All right, so I put the new oil filter on and I put the new fuel filter on, and then oil's still down here draining. It's going to take a minute. But anyway, after you put a fuel filter on, or if you run the machine out of fuel, then you need to purge the air out of the system. And the way we're going to do that is right down here. I've got this little squeeze ball. And then what I do is I just crack this vent, this little nut right here. I just crack that open. And I start squeezing that ball, and it's going to force the air out of the system. And so what I'm looking for is, one, I'm going to have to put a rag on this, so because it's going to kind of spew some fuel out of there. And then what I'm looking for, crack this a little bit more. And then what I'm looking for is a little bit more out of here. Is I don't want to see bubbles coming out of there. I just want to see straight fuel coming out of it. Okay, that's what we're looking for right there. And what I want to see is just straight fuel coming out of it, no bubbles, which I just got right there. And then just screw that little thing back down. All right, that's it. That was probably hard to see because it's got just a little bitty tiny hole right there. And you're going to press this, and what you're going to see is kind of some bubbles coming out of it. And then as soon as you just see straight fuel coming out of it, then stop squeezing. Might have to bleed that fuel a little bit more. All right, I like to mark the hours on here when this service was done, so it's just easier to keep up with. And I lied earlier about the number of hours that were on this machine. I said it was almost 2,400. It's actually only 2,337. So I've got less hours on it than I thought. Okay, so we've got the oil changed, oil filter, fuel filter. I did get that squeal on that alternator belt taken care of as well. It just needed to be tightened up a little bit. And so we are moving along on my service here. Just a couple more things that I want to do. And what I want to do right now is, I've done a video on this before. It was about a year ago, because I actually do this coolant service every year. But I want to service the coolant in my air conditioner system. So that is done obviously up under the cab, and it is done with this port right here, which is my low pressure port. This is my high pressure port right here. All I have to do is I just use this quick adapter that you can put on your coolant can, and it has a little gauge on there. It just makes it easy. It's not completely accurate as if you had a full gauge kit on there, but you just put it on right there on that low pressure side, and then I will crank the machine, and then I'll just add some coolant. It's not going to take that much. This thing has a very slow leak in it. I know where it is, and it's buried so deep in there that I'm just not going to mess with it. And for the 3 years that I've had this machine, I have gotten away with just adding a small amount of coolant every year, and it will last me the whole year. All right. We got everything serviced. We got everything greased. I got the new tilt cylinders put on the front of the skid steer. Oil change. Fuel filter change. Charged up the air conditioning system there a little bit for these summer months that are coming up, and everything's working great. And just in time, I had a tree that fell down in this area the other night when we had a storm that came through, and it fell right up against or right onto our manure pile. We can't have that, so we got to get that tree out of there. The first job after the service here is let's put the grapple on it, and let's get this tree hauled out of here. On to the next job.